never quitting. And while Rav Teitz, his legacy is JEC, the community, he's known for his involvement with Soviet Jewry. And the Rabbi Sauber said today there's this other thing that was created of the Daf Hashavua. When Rav Teitz would sit on a Motzei Shabbos in the basement, right? It was here in the basement. And just spread Torah. And the legacy of the Teitz family is spreading Torah. And we sit here today as ultimate beneficiaries of that, of those visions and those dreams. Baruch Hashem, this year, Sammy Kleiman and Rabbi Frankel came to meet with me and Rabbi Sauber after Sukkot and had an idea. Daf Yomi is pretty overwhelming. And while it takes 7.5 years, Sammy was content with finishing Shas in his 50s. And so he wanted to start Daf Hashavua because it's doable and we can do it. And he spoke with Rabbi Frankel, and together they built something. And they built something for the seniors during one of the class periods, and then in lunch, to have guys take lunch, 20 guys, 25 guys, to sit daily in lunch and to learn together and to grow together and build that legacy is something that is another jewel in the crown of the Teitz legacy. And it's something that we, as everyone else, as the onlookers, can see and take a message and look up to and admire and aspire. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce or welcome Rav Teitz to speak to us. Rav Teitz, who carries on the legacy in the most unbelievably humble and pristine way. And the conversations, which you boys are not often privy to, that I have the privilege of having with Rabbi Teitz. The care, dedication, thoughtfulness, wisdom is ever present. I ask you to rise and please give him attention.
At my father's funeral, one of my sisters said, "We can't fill his shoes, but we can walk in his footsteps." And that is what we've been trying to do ever since he passed away 23 years ago. My father's presence in America came about as a result of his sisters having married one of the top students of Telzer Yeshiva in Europe. How so? My father had a reputation in Europe as a speaker. As a young man, he was engaged by Agudas Yisrael to go around and speak and encourage communities to open up schools, chadorim as they were called, to educate their children. His brother, my uncle, told me that the first school he founded was in the shtetl where his father was the Rav. I asked how old was he at the time that he founded the school? 14 and a half. So it's something that from childhood, he was dedicated to the spread of Torah. But as I said, his sister married one of the top Bachrim in Telzer Yeshiva. And at that wedding, my father spoke. Present at that wedding was one of the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Meir Bloch, who was the one who was chosen ultimately to start the Telzer Yeshiva in America. But in 1933, the yeshiva was going to send him on a one-year campaign throughout the United States to raise funds for the yeshiva. And having heard my father, he insisted that he wanted my father to come along because of his power of speech. So he spent a year from November 1933 till the end of 1934, traveling the length and the breadth of America. But he didn't just travel. He had an eye. He had an understanding, and he got a penetrating view of the situation in America where 2 generations were lost to Yiddishkeit. And he saw conservatism and he saw reform. And he made the following statement. He said, the difference between Orthodox on the one hand and the conservative reform sects on the other hand is a question of diagnosis. They decided that Yiddishkeit in America is sick, it's ailing. And what do you do when you have a sickness? If need be, you amputate. So they amputated Shabbos, they amputated Kashrus, they amputated Taras HaMishpacha. So he says, Judaism may have survived, but it was a crippled Yiddishkeit. He says the Orthodox, and here he's speaking for himself very heavily, they said the diagnosis, what ailed American Jewry was malnutrition. They lacked the nutrition of Torah. Supply that nutrition, and the problems would be solved. And the result was what we see today, thriving Yiddishkeit. Orthodoxy is the only part of Yiddishkeit which has a future. Among Reform Jews, more than 50% are not Jewish because of their intermarriage rate. The conservative movement is failing. And what's thriving and what's growing and what's here today is Torah true Jews. And that was the vision he developed in 1934. As a matter of fact, young Israel wanted to offer him a fabulous salary for those days, $20,000, when the going salary was $1 or $2 a day, to travel around, and he turned them down. And I asked him once, why did he do it? He said he felt that he had something to contribute. But he told the story. There was a League of Nations, which was the predecessor of the United Nations. And there was a whole case that came. The United States never joined, by the way. And there was a big fight about Italy having invaded Ethiopia. And it was being put to a vote. The deciding vote was going to be cast by Luxembourg, with a population of, I think, under 1 million at the time. The mayor of New York was Mayor LaGuardia, who was an Italian. And he came out speaking against Italy. And the Italian delegate in the League of Nations got up, they met in New York, said, who is this person to offer an opinion? The mayor of a city. And he's going to get involved in the fate of nations. So he was a mayor of a city, but a city of 7 million at the time. The state that was going to cast the deciding ballot had far less, a population which was far less. So how come? My father said it's a din. The din is that if you have 2 loaves of bread, one is big, but it started. One is intact, but it's smaller. On which one do you make the motzi? On the whole one. He said he felt he had something to contribute, but he felt it had to be in an area where he could be in full control, complete, whole, rather than just a cog in the wheel. And that's why he turned them down and stayed here. A shidduch made, by the way, by that Rebbe Meir Bloch, because his father and my grandfather, Rabbi Preil, were best of friends in Europe. Rabbi Preil had been the Rav here and died tragically young, asking the community to wait until his 18-year-old daughter married, and if she married a Rav, to take him. And that's how it came about. And the rest, as they say, is history, quite a bit of a history. He first started to build a mikveh, because one is not allowed to live in the city without a mikveh. That took 3 years. And then he started working on opening a day school. Now you have to understand that when this school opened in 1941, in all the United States, the only places, there were only 3 cities in which you could go to the same school for Limudei Kodesh and secular studies. One was New York, of course, which had several. In Baltimore, there was a Rav Schwartz, who happened to be my grandfather's brother-in-law, opened up a school for boys called TA, Talmudical Academy, in 1916. In 1938, Rav Soloveitchik opened up Maimonides in Boston, and that was it. Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, all these major cities had no education of this type for their children. And here, all of those cities I just listed, by the way, had 100,000 or more Jews. And here in a community of 5,000 to 6,000 Jews, he was going to open up a day school and had the chutzpah in the positive sense to put into the bylaws of its founding document to start a school and to be an example for others to emulate. That was his thought already in 1941. Today, there's hardly a community this size which does not have such a school. Torah Masorah, which is the National Association of Day Schools, didn't start until 3 years after the JEC was founded. In fact, we were one of the 7 founding schools of that organization because he understood that the secret to maintaining and to expanding Yiddishkeit was through the spread of Torah. This was his first effort, and all of you are testimony to the success of that effort, obviously. You and the thousands who have come before you. I hope not too many thousands after you, because I hope we will all be in Eretz Yisrael in the very near future. And therefore, there won't be a need of a JEC in Elizabeth. But for so long as there is, we look at the communities around us, and one by one, they started becoming places in which one didn't want to live. Newark is the prime example. Newark once had 80 shuls. Today it doesn't have 80 Jews. Well, now it's building up again, but that's how the communities decline. Elizabeth remains strong. And as my father would say, other communities maintain institutions. This was an institution which maintained the community. And that indeed was the case. I won't talk too much about Daf Hashavua, which was his next step, because Rabbi Blau, Mirza Hashem, will discuss it. But I will just mention that it was the first time that the radio was utilized for teaching Torah. In 1953, until that time, nowhere in the world was the radio used to teach Torah. Once he started, it became a flood. In fact, one group, Lubavitch, wanted to have the half hour after him so they could have his audience leading in. And to have an idea of how widespread it became, in those days, there was something called the McCarthy era, which I imagine you students are not too familiar with. It was an era, McCarthy was a senator who was looking for communists everywhere and chasing after them in manner which was rather underhanded. But as a result, the federal government was monitoring all foreign language broadcasts to make sure that they weren't being used for communist propaganda. And I remember when 2 agents came in here, because Yiddish was a foreign language, and they asked my father if he knew what the size of his audience was. And he said he had no idea. As I mentioned, he would sit down in the studio downstairs, which is no longer there, and make a tape and send the tape in, and it was broadcast. So he told them, I don't know, I speak to the walls. They told him that they estimate his audience at between 175 and 225,000 a week. And again, at his unveiling, I made a little quick cheshbon. I said, let's say it's an exaggeration. It was only 100,000. Okay? And there were well over 1,000 broadcasts over the 35 years, which he gave each year at 9 o'clock. And when the clock changed at 9:30, until even that became too early. But for about 35 weeks a year, it was broadcast. So you make the cheshbon, 100,000 people, half an hour, that's 50,000 hours. 1,000 broadcasts, that's 50 million hours. He taught 50 million hours of Torah. It's a nice cheshbon with which to come to the other memes. And, yeah, I hope I'm not stepping on. One of his calculations was there were many Jews who went off the path, became members of socialist movements, particularly Yiddishisten, as they were called. And he said they're getting older now. And he's sure that they're beginning to have feelings of regret and of tshuva. But they're embarrassed from their own children, whom they indoctrinated that all this was an old-fashioned relic of the past. So he said, if they won't come to the Torah, let's bring the Torah into their living rooms. And interestingly, after the first broadcast, he got about 100 letters. He was learning Megillah, which starts out in Megillah Nikres, and it mentions the days. 50 of the letters were saying exactly what he said, that they had were looking for a way back, and he brought it to them. The other 50 letters said, what do you mean Megillah Nikras? It's Megillah Nikras. Your dictum is wrong. So that was as far as the spreading of Torah is concerned. And he was active. He was thrown out of the Agudas Rabbanim, which was the main rabbinical body in those days. They were mostly European rabbis who had most of the positions in America in those days. And he had the audacity to tell them that they had to start giving their sermons in English, not in Yiddish, because the second generation did not speak Yiddish, and they were being lost. And they threw him out. What do you mean, you're going to change things? But they came around to the other aspect of what he was doing, and this care for Yidden all over, was the Soviet Union. And that began because that was the time when there were public demonstrations and the like, and he was concerned. He said he doesn't know if those demonstrations help the Jews in Russia or just satisfy the feelings of the Americans that they're doing something, but it may be harmful for them. And so he went there to see for himself and to talk with the leaders of the Jewish community there as to whether it's a benefit or a detriment. And while he was there, he saw the need and started printing. In Europe, in Russia, you couldn't get it. Sidurim, Chumashim, Talis and Tefillin, Esrogim. For years, we sent Esrogim and Melovim to 6 of the major cities in Russia. And those were the only Esrogim and Melovim they had. And I remember one time I was sitting in his office going through the mail, and my father had a visitor at the time who was saying it's all a bluff. They don't let them distribute the Esrogim and the Melovim. They confiscate them and make them write letters that they've gotten it. While he's doing that, I'm reading the letter. I said, here, read this letter. It's a letter from a woman who had just come back from visiting Russia. And she said, I had to write to you to tell you the thrill. I was there when the Esrogim and the Melovim arrived, the thrill with which it was accepted and distributed. I will say that the man, to show his regret, paid for that year's shipment. But he ended up making 22 trips between 1964 and 1984 under the communists. And they let him do it. And they knew what he was doing. But they didn't stop him because he never made any statements when he came home. He came back to America. It was quiet. But to make it official, he printed a siddur. I don't know if you've seen the Nichas Yerushalayim siddur. It's a small siddur which has everything in it. He spoke to the one who published it and had him add pages specifically for what's needed in Russia. For instance, what brachos you make on fruits, the text of Ksuba, which they didn't have, the times of Shkia, to know when Shabbos is. They had that, didn't have that either. It's all put in there. But it was printed officially for the American tourist in Russia. And he made an arrangement. There was one office which could arrange travel to Russia. It was owned by a Jew. And whenever a Jew traveled, he let my father know. He would get in touch with him and give him a talis, tefillin, chumash, and siddur to take to Russia. The siddur was printed in 5 different colors of cover, so that it looked like a set. So you could send 5 instead of just 1 without raising any questions, because the guards at the border certainly couldn't read the Hebrew to see that they were all the same. In fact, once the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, at that time under the leadership of Leonard Bernstein, was making a trip to Russia, 102 musicians. This was a cultural exchange where they were not particularly careful about the customs coming in. So my father got in touch with Leonard Bernstein, and every one of the members of the band, Jew or not Jew, came with a talis, pair of tefillin, chumash, and a siddur to leave for the Russians. Interestingly, my father had the idea. He spoke to the minister of cults. That's what they called the equivalent of the Sarabatot in Israel, Ministry of Religion. That was called Ministry of Cults because the communists didn't believe in religion. And he wanted to have permission to import them in. So when the tourists come, they'll have it. And they said, it's not necessary. Every tourist comes with one, which means they knew, but they let it go because of the fact that they saw that he wasn't being anti-Soviet. And he was probably the most potent force in the rise of the Tshuva movement in Russia. They studied from the things that he left. He used to speak in the shul. I used to invite him. And I used to joke with him. I said, you have two rabbinates, Elizabeth and the Soviet Union. 22 trips in 20 years, that's what it amounted to. So this is the scope of his accomplishments. He wasn't satisfied merely being the Rav of the city of Elizabeth. He had his impact throughout the United States and because of the Soviet Union, throughout the Soviet Union. It's unfortunate that such leadership is all too rare, but he was able to accomplish it and accomplish it on an epic scale for the 61 years for which he was the Rav here in Elizabeth. This is the legacy that he leaves behind. You, of course, are the living legacy. And Baruch Hashem, may you continue to live up to that legacy. I got a call yesterday from a woman. She's 55 years old, she said. She lived in Linden to reform parents. And they decided they wanted to send their child for a year to the school. And my father took her in. She thought it was very impressive because nowadays a child like that would not be accepted into many day schools. So little did she know that when my father came to Elizabeth, there were only 6 Shomer Shabbos families in the whole city. And it was with that he built the city. Today, you don't have 10 Jewish students in the public school system of Elizabeth. They're either here or they don't exist. But she said that 1 year that she spent here and learned the Aleph base and how to daven changed her life. And her sister a couple years later also. And they became frum. They both have gotten her large families. Her sister, she said, had 8 children and many grandchildren. And they're all Shomer Torah mitzvahs, all because there was a JEC and a Rav who saw to it that you come in no matter what your background is. So that is, in very brief form, unfortunately, if I keep on going, it won't be time for the rest of the program. So I'll leave it at that. And just as I said, I tried to give you a broad picture of what he did and to encourage you as his living legacy to see to it that your lives live up to what he constructed here.
Thank you, Rav Teitz. Before we get to the learning, Rabbi Frankel is going to do today's learning. And those of you who are watching, it should be a continuation for you. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Rabbi Yosef Blau, the Mashgiach Ruchni at Yeshiva University, of Rebbetzin Rivka Blau, and also from members of Daf Hashavua who came to join with us, who heard about what's going on here in JEC, were blown away by it, and came to join with us today in the commemoration of the Rav's yahrtzeit. Please, without any further ado, Rabbi Frankel to teach today's.
Sure, Rav Teitz, Rav Blau, Rav Newman, Rav Sauber, all the Rav PM, of course, Rav Abrams, who resurrected Daf Hashavua into the modern program that it is today, and Rabbi Globman as well, who's very involved with him. We'll get to them at the end. First, get to learning. We usually do a half Amud a day. Today, we'll do a little bit of a shortened program. We'll do a third, Mitzvah Hashem. We're on Daf Yid Aleph Amud Beis. In Megillah, Rav Teitz said that's where he started from. And last night, because Rav Teitz Zatzal, Rav Pinchas Teitz Zatzal, his shiurim are available. I went to listen to his shir on this Amud, and I have 2 things to say from him. One from a Chassam Sofer that he said over, and one from his own Vart. I'll finish with that and segue into Daf Hashavua. Hopefully we'll get that all done quickly. So the Gemara starts off. One other thing, I asked Rishus from the Rav, when his father, the Rav Zatzal used to start, he would start off, Loma Lenin Ablat Gemore. Hope I said that right. Enough. The Ashkenazic. Okay. Says the Gemara. So the Gemara starts off on Amud Beis. In yesterday's daf, for those that were there, so we said that there were 3 kings that ruled over the whole world. And those 3 kings was Achav, they were Achav, Nebuchadnezzar, and Achashverosh. So the Gemara is going to go on today and ask that there seems to be other kings that also did rule over the world. Why didn't the Gemara mention those? So says the Gemara. We start off at the top with a Nutrik and a Siman, a Mnemonic, Shin Samach Daled Chaf, and Rashi says it refers to the 4 kings that the Gemara is going to ask that seemingly also ruled the world: Shlomo HaMelech, Sancheriv, Daryavesh, and Koresh. Says the Gemara. Ask the Gemara, V'suleka, is that true? Is it only those 3 kings of Achav, Nebuchadnezzar, and Achashverosh? V'ika Shlomo, there was Shlomo HaMelech that also ruled the world. Answers the Gemara, Lo Solik Malchusay. Says Rashi, Lo Hishla Malchusay. His kingdom wasn't complete. Shari Nitrad, it got interrupted. Kedamrina Masechtas Gittin, like we said, Masechtas Gittin, a whole lengthy Gemara that speaks about the demon Ashvadai that took Shlomo HaMelech off his throne. So therefore, he didn't actually continue to rule the world. Ask the Gemara, Ha Nichel Amanda Amar Melech V'Hedyot. This is good according to the Mandamar that says that he was a melech and then he became a hedyot and then he became a commoner. El Mandamar Melech V'Hedyot Melech. But according to the Mandamar there, that says that he was a king and then he became a hedyot, he became a commoner, but then Umelech, he became a king again. Ma'ikal Amemar, what are you going to say? So he did end up ruling the whole world. Hear the kasha? Good kasha. Says the Gemara. It was something different by Shlomo HaMelech. There's a little bit of a question how to learn this answer. I'll say it the way Rav Teitz said it. He was better than the other kings. Why was he better than the other kings? He was king not only on the lower spheres on this world, he was even king on he was of the upper spheres and on the lower spheres. He wasn't only king on the lower spheres, he was also king over the upper spheres. Says Rashi, who are these creatures on the upper spheres? Says Rashi, the 3rd line in Rashi on the top, Al Yonim, Al Shedim. He was the ruler over Shedim. Shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Vayeshev Shlomo al Kisei Hashem. And Shlomo HaMelech sat on the Kisei Hashem. The Marsha explains what's the Kisei Hashem. It's the Shemayim, the heavens, like it says, Hashemayim Kisi. Hashem says that the heavens is my throne. So therefore, he was even better that he had a rulership. It happens to be that Rav Teitz Zatzal said in his shir that there's 2 gersos in Rashi, either ala shedim or ala sarim, on the asarim, on the officers, on princes. I looked around, I could not find that girsa, but I'm sure, obviously it's around, but in our modern versions, we don't have that girsa. Says the Gemara Vayter. I just want to say one other thing he says over the Chassam Sofer, a beautiful thing Rav Teitz said. He says that the Chassam Sofer says, a hint to what Shlomo HaMelech was king over the Elyonim and the Tachtonim. He says the Tachtonim refers to a regular king that forces us to do what he wants. He's a Moshel, he's has dominion over our guf, but our heart, our love, our senses, that's not something we care about. We don't care about him. Says the Chassam Sofer, when it says that Shlomo HaMelech was more chashuv than the other kings, he was even a king ala Elyonim. Everyone realized how wonderful he was. He didn't only rule their guf, he also ruled their heart, their neshama, their senses, out of ava, out of love. So that's where Rav Teitz said over from Chassam Sofer. Says the Gemara further. On line 6, I lined them up. There was Sancheriv, the king of Ashur, Dichsiv, that it says there that Rav Shake, his person that came to speak for him, said, and who amongst the gods of all the lands, of these lands, saved their lands from my hand. I am ruler over all the lands. So so therefore you see that Sancherib also was a ruler over all the lands. Answers the Gemara with the way the Bach changed it. Havi Yerushalayim, there was still Yerushalayim, the low Kavsha that he never conquered. The Mefarshim speak out. Of course, the Gemara knew this in the Havamina in the beginning, but it was asking that Yerushalayim was so small that it was so small. So therefore, if the only land he didn't have was Yerushalayim, that was enough. And the Gemara answers, no, Yerushalayim might be small in size, but it was the pulse of the world, and therefore not conquering Yerushalayim was enough to say that he didn't have the whole world under his dominion. Ask the Gemara, two more. There was the Yavesh, that it says, when Der Yavesh saw the great nace that happened with Daniel, that he got saved from the lion's den, he sent letters to all his people, Amamaya, Umaya, the nations, the languages, the Dair Mechol Ara that lived in all the land, Shlom Chon Yaske, that your peace should multiply. So you see that if he sent letters to all the land, must be he was the ruler of all the land. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Ha'ika Sheva de Lamalach Alayu. There were still 7 nations that he wasn't a king on, like it says in the pasuk. Shvar Kadam Dar Yavesh, who was pleasing before Dar Yavesh, Ve'ekim Amachusei, and he appointed on his kingdom, Lachshtar Panaya, over governors, Ma'av Esrin, 120 governors. So we know in Achashverosh's time, he ruled the whole world. How many provinces did he have? 127. And here, Daryavish only had 120. So you see he was missing 7. Yes, the Marsha. So why did he send letters throughout the whole world? Says the Marsha, he still sent letters to the last 7 provinces because he wanted to give over and tell them how amazing the nisim that Hashem does, even though he never ruled Shabbat with them. Says the Gemara, one more, Vo'ika Koresh. There was Koresh, who was after Daryavish, before Achashverosh, Chsiv, Ko Amar Koresh Melech Paras. So said Koresh, the king of Paras, Kol Mamlachos Haaretz Nosan Li Hashem. Hashem has given me all the kingdoms of the world. So you see, he also ruled over the whole world. Answers the Gemara, he was just praising himself, but it wasn't true praise. So just to end with something Rav Teitz said on his own, he said it's a pashut thing, it's an obvious point. Rav Teitz asked on his shir, he said, why is the Gemara so busy with who ruled the whole world? It was this king, it was that king. What's it nogea? Why does it apply to us? Which kings ruled the whole world? That's what he asked at the end of the shir. So he wanted to say like this. It's a nice kasha. Everyone hear the kasha in the back? Why do we care who ruled the whole world? You hear? I see so many boys that really could be sitting there. They're humble or there's no seats, but I'm proud of all of you. There's so many guys, and I invite everybody to join starting tomorrow. Is there night Seder? So Rav Teitz said like this. He said a beautiful thing. He said that Hashem did something wonderful for Klal Yisrael. He made us disperse throughout the world. Why? Because in Galus. Because he wanted to have it that if we ever had a ruler that tried to make decrees against us, then his country would have the decrees, but the rest of Klal Yisrael would be able to persevere and exist. But those kind of kings, Hashem would let their decrees go because he would let their decrees exist because Klal Yisrael could still exist. But when you have a king that's a king over the whole world, so his decrees, that means his decree is over the whole Klal Yisrael. And that means that if his decree is over the whole Klal Yisrael, if Hashem is going to let that decree happen, the whole Klal Yisrael is going to be destroyed. So therefore, what did Hashem do? When he saw that there was a king that had certain decrees that Klal Yisrael could not keep on going with, he made them rulers over the whole world so that he could turn around and say, that's it. I can't let you exist. Your decrees exist because it'll cause Klal Yisrael to fall apart because since you own the whole world, you're a ruler over the whole world. In fact, he says that's why Megillah starts off Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh hamolech mehodu v'ad kush sheva v'esr mea medina. Why does it start off like that? He says because Mordechai and Esther wanted to tell us at the beginning. Obviously they didn't know that at that point, but they wanted to let us know that right away at the beginning, the fact that Achashverosh was ruler of the whole world, that was his downfall. So therefore, that's why it's important to the Gemara to know. And even Achav, says Rav Teitz Asal adds, Achav was against the Torah. He wanted to take away the Torah from the whole Klal Yisrael. That's what we're going to go to dots today. Third, I just want to say a word about the Rav and then of Daf Hashavua today. I was thinking this is perfect. The Rav Zatzal, as Rav Teitz said when he spoke so eloquently about his father, the Rav Zatzal, his impression was all over the world. Just like we have the kings that were kings over the whole world, his impression was all over the world, in Torah, in Yiddishkeit, and all it was. And now that he's not here anymore, Daf Hashavua, led by Rabbi Abrams, who started the modern version of Daf Hashavua, if he came in today, we would all have to stand up. A huge Talmid Chacham who has done a tremendous thing for Klal Yisrael. So, and Rabbi Globman's here. He has helped that Rav Teitz's legacy is now all over the world. Again, it's all over the world when he was alive. It's all over the world when he's not here. And I just want to say, Rav Teitz mentioned it, that Rav Teitz Zatzal had a mantra. His quote used to be, learn Torah, love Torah, live Torah. Love Torah, live Torah. And Rebbetzin Blau, that's the name of the book. Learn Torah, love Torah, live Torah. So, of course, even those that don't learn Torah have to live Torah. But I have to say, and this is on a personal note, and I just want to say it out in front of Rabbi Abrams, Rabbi Globman, a special thank you, because I spent a lot of time, many years learning in yeshiva. Baruch Hashem, I enjoyed it very much. But when someone's busy bringing up a family and they're doing jobs and we're working late, it's very hard to get themselves into. We're tired. Sometimes we don't have time often. And what Daf Hashavua has done in its modern version is that it gives everyone a chance to tap in. I know that there are Rav PM here that do Daf Hashavua, Rav Newman, Rav Sauber do Daf Hashavua, and a lot of my family members do it now. And what it does is there's something for everybody. You do a blot a week. It's not easy, but you could do it without tests. You could do it with tests. They have tests every week. You feel part of a world tzibur, a world community, and that makes you feel good. It makes you feel part of the learning community. It's so important, and that's a little bit when I think about Rav Teitz saying, "Learn Torah, love Torah." Most people wouldn't say it in that order, as Rav Teitz said earlier. But Rav Teitz understood that the pulse of Klal Yisrael is to learn Torah. And I've spoken to people, alumni, other friends, that some of them are not as religious as they would like to be. And you know what? We talk about, they say, how could we start learning Daf Hashavua? We don't do this. I said, no, it's nothing to do with it. You start learning Torah, and to paraphrase Rav Teitz, you start learning the Torah, and you love it, especially in this system. You could take tests. You could take open tests. You could get behind. I was talking to my son this morning who's learning in Eretz Yisrael, and he just took the Bechina. He takes it every Thursday night. He goes to the Kosel to take the Bechina. And he told me that he skipped Daf Ches. He didn't take the Bechina because he was busy with the 5-blot test. They give 5-blot tests. My 8th grade son last night at 11:30 sent in. It was due. They have deadlines. They're very rough. They have deadlines. The Bechina on Daf Tes was due yesterday. He sent it in at 11:30 at night. I hope we got it in. We have a little poll. Hopefully we'll get that done. But if anyone wants to join, and this is a future. It's a future for any time. As Rav Newman and Rav Sauber always keep on saying, when you guys leave, and this Sammy Kleiman also said, when you guys leave, you could always tap in to the live streams, even when you're here at any time. There were guys saying they watched on the day off, on the bus, off the bus. It's a beautiful nachas. So I give a bracha to everyone around the room, Tyra, Rav PM, the administration, everyone else, that we should just continue growing together, and we should come ultimately after we learn Torah and love Torah. Mirz Hashem, we should taka be able to say that we're living Torah through and through. Shkoch.
Rabosai, first of all, Yashar Koach by Frankel, and to this amazing group of boys who are learning Daf Hashavua daily. Right now, I'm going to ask seniors only. Seniors only, please take your plate. Oh, you know what I'm going to ask you? We can pause it. Seniors only, please take your plates. I will also mention today's Seudah is being sponsored by the Ness family. A round of applause for the Ness family. It happens to be that Ephraim and Gavi's great-grandfather received an award at the Washington Hotel at the 25th anniversary of the Daf Hashavua dinner. So a special connection for the Ness family and Daf Hashavua, so thank you to them. 12th graders, please only go to the 12th grade section. Eleventh graders, please take your plates. Washing can be done in the kitchen or at the sink in the hall outside. Washing can be done in the kitchen or the sink or the hall outside. Tenth grade, take your plates, please. Ninth graders, plates. Washing is outside in the hallway. Eighth graders, 1 second, 1 second. Eighth graders, 1 second. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Okay, eighth grade, take your plates. Washing is in the kitchen or in the hall outside the right bell base metrics, like Jacob Winters. Get back to me.
It's a whole week. They have a whole week there. Yeah.